Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and a lot of people have been asking again lately, hey, how long should I take between sets? I see that you take a fair amount of time between your sets with the moderately heavyweight, all the triples, the 3-rep sets, 5-rep sets, all of that. How long should I be taking, even if I'm doing higher reps? That's a great question, and actually there's a fair amount of research on that at this point. And what people need to remember, you've got to throw these bodybuilding myths out the door. There's a lot of things pro bodybuilders do that works great for them because they're on tons of drugs and everything else, but it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And we actually do have a number of studies that have been done on this. Dr. Brad has talked about it. A lot of people have talked about it. Short breaks between sets simply do not put the most muscle mass on you. They don't. And I know that's something I've had to correct myself on in the past. You guys remember I talked about the various forms of progressive overload, and one of them I included wasn't just weight on the bar, wasn't just number of reps done, it was how much work you can do in a certain time frame. So it was called workload density. Actually, that's not true. That is not a form of progressive overload that actually seems to help put muscle on you. And that's something I've had to correct. I've had to correct based upon the data that's come out over the years, because I used to say that, yeah, that is a form of progression. If you can cut time down between sets and continue to lift the same weight. But no, that's not actually true. And before I get into some of that, it's kind of funny. I do get people who, one of the criticisms they offer, and you know what, there's a lot of criticism people get offered to different people. There's valid criticism people make of me, and there are times when I have to look at it and go, you know what, they're right. But people come up with the criticism of actually act like it's a bad thing that I take long breaks between sets. They're like, oh, see, that's why you're not ripped. You take long breaks between sets. Oh, you rest a long time between sets. They make it sound like a bad thing. And actually, it's not. You're actually complimenting me. You're saying, wow, this guy's smart. He actually knows how to train to get big and strong. That's actually what you're saying. It's not even an insult. And so it's funny how people will criticize when you're actually doing something intelligent. You guys ever notice that in life? And that's just this is going to be kind of a side note. But you notice that in life when you're actually doing something that you know is the correct, intelligent, and best way to do something, that people will come in and actually try to make fun of it, sometimes like complete ignoramuses who really don't know what they're talking about will actually make fun of it. That's the bane of smart people in this world that you will always have to deal with. If you're even remotely smart, really stupid people are going to make fun of you. That's something that's been noted over the years by many, many people. Intelligent people tend to be heavily criticized by really stupid people who don't understand that they actually are smarter than they are. In the case of the longer breaks, why would I do that? Because we know it gives the most muscle growth. In other words, when people ask how long of a break should I take between sets, I would say as long of a break as you need. Here's ultimately the downside to longer breaks in the gym. Do you know the only downside? You spend more time in the gym. It's not necessarily ideal from a time economy, right? A time economy in the gym to take long breaks. That's the reason higher rep sets are often preferred for hypertrophy training. They don't actually put more muscle on you. It's the fact that you can do fewer sets and stimulate the same amount of growth. And fewer sets without having to take tons of breaks between them, you're going to get in and out of the gym faster. That was one of the things that we noted in the studies that were done when workload was equal. People who were doing 7 sets of 3 gained the same amount of muscle mass as people doing 3 sets of 10. Because they equal, if you're using relative rate of perceived exertion, 7 triples is going to have enough percentage heavier weight on it that it's going to equal about the same number of pounds moved as 3 sets of 10. They produce the same amount of muscle. The 7 sets of 3 produce slightly more strength, slightly better 1-rep maxes, but they both produced similar muscle growth. Now people would say, hey, well, that's great. Then clearly high sets of triples is the best way to train. Well, it takes 3 times as long. Meaning, if you come in and you do 3 sets of 10 and you rest, say, 3 minutes, 4 minutes between sets, think about that for a moment. That's about 12 minutes per exercise. That's 12 minutes spent on an exercise. What happens if you take 3 or 4 minutes between 7 sets? It starts adding up real quick, doesn't it? because you have the sets, and let's say you take a minimum of 3 minutes between. You're going to go past 20 minutes, 25 minutes. You're going to easily double or more the amount of time you have to spend in the gym on each exercise. So from a time economy, that doesn't work, because you can gain the same muscle in half the time spent with higher reps. You won't gain as much strength. Slightly less strength, same amount of muscle. So it comes down to what is it that you're seeking in the gym. But as far as rest times go, all the data we've seen is that resting any less than 3 minutes doesn't produce maximum hypertrophy. The reason being, you can't replicate your sets. In other words, if your breaks are so short and you're working with a relatively challenging weight and rep scheme, if your breaks are so short that you can't replicate your performance on every single set, then you are losing gains. Because what we know, when we talk about volume, people don't understand that term. Volume is the amount of work you do. It's not just, hey, I did 3 sets of 10. It's, I did 3 sets of 10 with 400 pounds. And if you do 3 sets of 10 with 400 pounds, it's more volume than 3 sets of 10 with 300 pounds. In fact, it's 33% more volume. Again, assuming you're moving the weight the same distance, same leverages and everything. So work done. Work done is the biggest driver of hypertrophy. That's what we've noted in all the data out there. That's why 7 sets of 3, when it equals the same rough pounds moved or kilos moved that the 3 sets of 10 does, it produces the same gains. About the amount of work that you do. And it makes sense. I mean, we oftentimes say things without even realizing it. You know, hard work is what makes muscle grow. We can quantify that. Hard work isn't an arbitrary term. That is true. Hard work does make muscles grow. But work actually can be calculated mathematically, right? Work, horsepower is a calculation of work done, isn't it? These are scientific terms. These are things we can calculate. So yeah, the amount of work you do is a big driver, the biggest driver of how much muscle growth you stimulate. Well, if you're reducing rest times and you can't handle the same weight for the same number of reps, or you're forced to use a lighter weight for the same number of reps all the way through because you're cutting rest times down, you stimulate less muscle growth. And I'm not saying that arbitrarily. There have been multiple studies done on this. The studies actually show the same thing too. So we have common sense and we have research on it. In other words, we have actual research showing, yeah, you don't gain quite as much muscle if you do that. And then common sense dictates, well, you're going to do less work. Less work equals less muscle growth. And it isn't about, oh, how much cardio can I do with a muscle? It's how much work can I do with a muscle? It's work that makes muscles bigger. So the question that we come back to is, how long of a break should you take between sets? As long of a break as you need. All right, now there's a caveat to that. It also comes down to how much time are you willing to spend in the gym taking those breaks. And that's oftentimes a big limiting factor in how we train. Some people have more free time than others. Now people will say, well, we all have the same 24 hours. People can make the time. Well, people who have less free time have to be more efficient with their time in the gym, and they might have to adjust their training style to work around the fact that they can only get in the gym for 45 minutes at a time, or an hour, or 30 minutes. And if you're someone who your lifestyle requires you to spend less than an hour in the gym in a workout, you have to really pay attention to your efficiency in the gym. You really have to. If you want to get the most out of that session, you're going to have to pay attention to that. So the biggest problem we run into with that question, and that's the reason it's relative, is not how much time should you take between sets. As much time as you need, as much time as you can, actually, is probably closer to ideal. But the problem is not that, because most people don't have the limitless free time to take 5 minutes between sets and to do 10 sets. The average person may not have an hour to dedicate to one exercise. So the problem is that that's not a straightforward answer to your question. It might be, what's the most efficient time to rest between sets, and that's probably about 3 minutes. We know resting any less than 3 minutes produces submaximal gains, unless you're on a bunch of gear. But the question that comes back there too is that people who train less efficiently need a little more gear to make the same results, don't they? Now, a lot of bodybuilders, that's not a factor, is it? Because they just use massive amounts anyways. It's a non-factor. But you guys see the problem there. It doesn't work for someone who's trying to train natty or TRT or low doses or anything else. You really have to be a little more intelligent with the way you train. And a lot of that comes down to realizing these little short breaks between sets doesn't produce the best muscle growth. It just doesn't. And there's plenty of data out there showing that it doesn't, at least in people who aren't on any drugs. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.